Very much, Madam Chair. Budgets are the ultimate document that tells us what the choices that a government is willing to make are. And a budget is about choices. It is about choosing which programs to fund. It's about choosing how to fund those programs. It's about either being realistic about the fiscal situation a province faces, or it is about burying your head in the sand or perhaps crossing your fingers and simply hoping that things turn around. I think we have seen how that has gone for previous governments who've tried that. Unfortunately, we have a government who is in exactly the same position, who has based a budget this time, yet again, on hope that the price of oil goes up, on the hope that we can get not one but two pipelines built. And I sincerely and genuinely do hope that that is going to happen. But it is risky for the province to bank our fiscal future and our fiscal sustainability on that hope. And not only hoping that pipelines get built at all, but hoping that they get built in some reasonable time frame. And I think, as we've seen from the incredible opposition to the Kinder Morgan pipeline in BC, that is far from a sure thing. And as we've seen recently, the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline has faced some setbacks in terms of its likelihood of moving forward in an expeditious manner. So I sincerely do hope those projects do move ahead and that they move ahead quickly, but I have some grave concerns, and I wouldn't say it is responsible for a government to budget on the assumption that those things, those projects are going to go ahead. So the purported plan to balance the budget is really nothing more than fantasy, pure fantasy. When I saw the budget, that was the first word that came to my mind, was this budget is pure fantasy. It is a hope. It is not a plan. I wish that the government had found even a tiny modicum of savings. What was one of the most remarkable things to me, talking with stakeholders in the Rotunda after the budget speech on March 22nd, when the budget was brought down, was the number of stakeholders from funded either agencies or even internal departments within government, and I won't name names or talk about which departments, but I can tell you it was more than one, that said, you know, we don't mind receiving an increase this year. I guess we'll take the money, of course we will, but they were genuinely concerned, Madam Chair, genuinely concerned about the sustainability of that funding. Was it actually going to be there a year or two down the road? Because the more money that was put in and the higher the deficit levels and the higher the debt loads, those stakeholders realized the more likely it was that there would be a change of government as a result of terrible fiscal mismanagement on the part of this government. And they were worried that perhaps a far right-wing government would come in and bring in 90s-style cutbacks. It was a genuine concern, and I share that concern. So the good news is we in the Alberta Party stand here with a real plan. We brought forward our shadow budget, and our plan would not slash frontline services, but would bring in reasonable cost savings. That compassionate belt-tightening the government signaled so strongly leading into the budget, and that was the great surprise that I had heard from stakeholders was we were ready, we were prepared to do some minor economizing and belt-tightening, but the government didn't even ask us. They signaled they were going to do it, and we were ready to do it. We were able to find a way, but we didn't have to, so I guess we didn't. So that really told me that there are many, many areas, I think we know of many areas where we could find savings without having a tremendous impact on negative impact on frontline services. In fact, there may be areas, I suspect there are, where we could ask the tremendous public servants in our province to innovate in how they deliver those services. And to have an incentive to do so because they realize they have to do more with those scarce resources. So what's the impact of this whole plan? The impact, of course, is at best, the absolute best case scenario is $96 billion in debt by the time this government purported plan to balance what actually happened. The fascinating thing, of course, is I hope this comment isn't out of order, because that number's nowhere in the budget. That $96 billion number is nowhere in the budget. We all had to do a little bit of arithmetic and ask the department and cajole, and eventually it came out, well, it's going to be $96 billion by the time we actually think we might possibly balance, remembering that quote-unquote plan to balance is really based on an awful lot of things going right, an awful lot of things going well. One of those things is the income and personal income and corporate income taxes going up substantially over the next 5 years. Whereas under this government, the tax take, notwithstanding the fact that the taxes have been raised by this government, the actual take to the Treasury has gone down every year. It's lower than it was when this government took office because of the cumulative impact of all of the negative policies impacting the investment climate in this province. So to think that those corporate and personal income tax rates are going to go up by 40% or more is fantasy. So here we are, $96 billion in debt, very best. The government's tried to dress that up by looking at not debt to GDP like they've done in past budgets, but gone to net debt to GDP. And so again, trying to pull the wool over the eyes of Albertans. I remember cracking open the budget and the embargo. The first thing I went to look for was the debt to GDP numbers, and I couldn't find it. And it was, this budget is different. This budget is net debt to GDP. The table on page 10 or 11 is net debt to GDP this year, and last year it was debt to GDP. If I had the budget documents here, I would gladly show the finance minister exactly what I'm talking about. And so that was yet another attempt to really hide the true scale of the problem. Looks like my honourable colleague from Old Tisbury Three Hills is sharing a copy of the budget with me. So as I talk, I can flip the pages and we can go through and actually have a look for it. Unfortunately, the one volume here I need isn't in this pile. So the fiscal plan, Old Tisbury Three Hills, if you could bring that. Try to be helpful, not that helpful. Appreciate the effort though. And then just was it a week or so ago, the Auditor General released his leaving report, which is a fascinating read. I would hope that every member's had an opportunity to not just read the summary, but read the entire document. And one of the things the Auditor General talks about was the scale of the debt problem we're going to have by the year 2021, not even by 2023, when this government purports to possibly, maybe, sort of, hopefully, possibly, maybe balance the budget. But the Auditor General talked about that to pay off the amount of debt that this government will have accumulated by 2021, we would need to have a surplus of $3 billion a year for 25 straight years to pay that off. And we would need an additional $1 or $2 billion over and above that to simply maintain the level of infrastructure that we currently have. Not add more, just maintain it. So that would be surpluses of $4 to $5 billion, 25 straight years. That is the scale of the problem that we have in this province. And so we have a day of reckoning coming, unfortunately, sooner rather than later. And the only plan I can think of that may be worse than the government's plan would be the UCP's plan, except we don't really know their plan because they haven't shared a plan with us. They have done a lot of arm waving and made a lot of noise about it, but we don't know what their plan is. They're unwilling to share that with Albertans, and I've said many times in this House, and I'll say yet again, the job of those of us in opposition is not just to oppose government, not just to stand up against every single thing the government does. The job of those of us in government, that is half a job. The other half of the job is to propose ideas. So the Alberta Party has always been very, very clear about what we would do. We bring our shadow budgets out. We share with Albertans what our ideas are and allow those Albertans then to tell us what they think. That's what I think good government, good governance, and good opposition is. So this government has firmly kept us on the resource revenue roller coaster. Now they talk about getting us off, and the problem we have in this province is not so much an economic diversification problem. Alberta's economy, if you look at the actual underlying numbers, is one of the more diversified economies in the country. We actually have a relatively well-diversified economy. We certainly do very well on the oil and gas side. We have a lot of tremendous economic activity, a lot of jobs created in the oil and gas sector, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and long may it continue, long may that growth continue. But our economy in Alberta is actually relatively diversified. What isn't well diversified on government revenue sources. And this government has done nothing to to grow the pie. The minister is asking me about corporate and personal income tax, and although you've raised the rates, Minister, the actual amount of money that's being brought in by PIT and CIT is lower than it was when you came in, so that it has had a negative effect. So,
honourable members. I know we started in committee, but if we could please respect the speaker and at least keep the tone of the conversations down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'll conclude by saying that notwithstanding the fact that I will be voting against the appropriations bill, I'll vote against the budget as a whole because I don't think the budget in the aggregate took the right tack. I will say that proudly in the Alberta Party Caucus, we did vote in favour of 4 ministries. Children's Services, the budget for Children's Services, I was very pleased to see that was increased quite substantially as a result of the work we did in the Ministerial Panel on Child Intervention. The education budget, interestingly, Madam Chair, the Alberta Party in our shadow budget would actually spend more on K-12 education than this government has proposed. Having said that, I did vote in favour of the education budget because I think if there's anything we ought to be doing, it's investing in education. So the same applies then to post-secondary, which is why we supported that. And perhaps the most curious line item of the budget that the Alberta Party supported that the UCP did not was justice. The UCP has talked a lot about the rural crime crisis, and it is a crisis in many communities. And there has been more money put into the budget. Whether it's enough, it remains to be seen. I can tell you that is a huge challenge all around the province. But we voted in the Alberta Party in favour of the justice budget because of the fact that additional investments have been made to try to address rural crime in particular. So those 4 ministries we can support and did support. But overall, the opportunities to find even a modicum of savings, in particular in healthcare, which is by far the largest budget. And if we want to tackle the challenges of the fiscal challenges facing our province, we must find savings in healthcare. We must find meaningful efficiencies. We must move towards wellness and less focus on acute care. At the same time, we need to address waiting lists. We need to address the challenges posed by ensuring that seniors are healthy into later life, but also recognizing that as we age, we will take advantage of more, we will use more healthcare services. But how can we keep people healthier longer in community as best we can? I didn't feel that in this budget there was nearly enough emphasis or focus on that. I didn't feel there was nearly enough emphasis or focus on housing. Very interesting, in estimates we discovered that the vaunted 5-year plan to spend $1.2 billion on affordable housing has turned magically into a 7-year plan. Because the government just simply hasn't been able to organize itself well enough to get those dollars out the door. And on the housing side, same thing on the health, long-term care side. The government has taken a government-first approach as opposed to partnering with the not-for-profit community. That not only costs us more tax dollars in the short term, tax dollars we don't have, so we have to borrow, but it also takes longer to build. And I can tell you greatly frustrates the not-for-profit community, which you would think would be a natural ally of this government, and unfortunately they have really left those groups in the lurch. So in the end, Madam Chair, much as we did support 4 areas of this budget, we're unable to support it in the aggregate. Thank you very much.